Okay, welcome back to the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners meeting for the afternoon on August 25th. First item number 22, proposed contribution to Brothers Hampton Rangeland Fire Protection District. Nathan.
Before we do this
Sure.
item, could I just take a moment? What we were discussing literally just before our lunch break has already generated quite a number of email comments. Basically, people are writing saying, do not provide incentives to mandate vaccines for people. And I just wanted to clarify for anyone who's watching or hearing about things second or third hand, that what I was proposing just before lunch was not a mandate for vaccines. It was a voluntary incentive. So the concept I was putting forward would be to provide people with an incentive to get vaccinated through their employer tied to their health insurance. But it would not be a requirement. It would be something that people could take advantage, and hopefully it would motivate them, encourage them to get vaccinated. But we're not talking about mandates or anything that is kind of like a requirement. So, I hope whoever was watching and misinterpreted my comments is catching that, and we don't need to have, a whole bunch of email comments about something that wasn't even suggested. Thanks.
And I'd like to update the community on the count of homeless in the Sisters Ranger District. It's actually 180 per my conversation just now with Ian Reed. So originally there were 82 in the homeless count in January for Sisters, and the number's plus 100 now in the Ranger District. So anyway, just trying to keep our numbers and let people know really what are we dealing with here.
So I got a note at lunch. There's somebody sent out must have been a post or something that said communicate with council@bendoregon.gov and tony.debone@deschutes.org on Commissioner Chang's comments. But I'm just sharing that because, now my inbox has got 350 messages or 334 at Deschutes. I was down to 20 before this meeting.
If somebody could just track down the root posts that this is about and make that correction, I think maybe people would relax a little bit.
Okay, well, I'll have some mailbox management to do now. Okay, thank you. Nathan, please join us.
Hi, good afternoon, Commissioners. Nathan Garrity, Deschutes County Sheriff's Office Emergency Services Manager. Agenda item we're discussing today is proposed MOU or Memorandum of Understanding to contribute funds to support the Brothers Hampton Rangeland Fire Protection Association. You may have remembered a couple years ago or a few years ago, we entered into a similar agreement. It was only a 2-year agreement. It lapsed. There's interest on the part of Brothers Hampton Rangeland Protection Association to get a new agreement. Essentially, they provide fire protection to a large tract of unprotected land in eastern Deschutes County. They do this in coordination and cooperation with the Bureau of Land Management and Central Oregon Fire Management Services. And then they report annually to Oregon Department of Forestry through the Rangeland Fire Protection Association program, which is managed out of ODF. Essentially what the proposal is to provide funding to support their operations, minimum of $1,000 a year, and then upwards matching based on their membership dues. That gives them additional funds to support their operations, everything from buying equipment to gas to supporting rent for a building they rent, and to provide equipment, personal protective equipment, and fuel for their operations to keep them operating.
So I remember we did a sage grouse tour, and Ed Keith was with us, and he mentioned that we were in that area, geographically in that area, and it's good to know that there's resources that are placed in that, side of the county, that eastern portion of the county, just in case. So we just have some example of knowing the resources were there.
Rangeland Fire Protection Associations are doing really, really important work all over particularly the east side of the state. And it's exciting to know about this group and to learn about Deschutes County's relationship with it. My question was membership participation on the community end. Can you give us a sense of kind of the participation, essentially, among landowners, or I know that there are a lot of small land holdings out there. So, and many of those people may not live out in that area. They just own property. But kind of, do you have a sense among larger landowners, active residents of that area, whether we have pretty good participation, or what's the situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have current numbers. I can get those for you and send you that information. As of the end of 2019, I think they had around 39 to 40 members. And they were bringing in, I think, a little under $1,000 annually in membership dues. So a lot of this is they're paying the association to be a member and to get that fire protection. And interesting, I think it's in the staff report, but there's about 2,200 acres of Deschutes County owned land that's actually within the protection boundaries of the RFPA. So one could argue that this is kind of our way of being a member, so to speak, of contributing those funds also. So I could get you a better breakdown of that. That is a great question, but I apologize. I don't have current numbers for you.
Right. Well, yeah, I'd definitely be interested in knowing that. I mean, the financial end of things in some ways is less important than the person power end of things, because these rangeland fire protection associations depend on the members being being some of the first responders, to get on a fire. So it would be good to know that there's a lot of engagement out there, because that to me would indicate that this Rangeland Fire Protection Association is ready to respond when a fire occurs.
Who's the other signatory?
That's a great point, and that information is included in their report to Oregon Department of Forestry annually, so I can pull that and send you the latest copy.
That'd be great.
That's exactly what I'd like to see too. Good. So yeah, who's the signatory on there, on the association side? I'm sure that'll be part of the report, who the players are.
Yeah, that'll be, I assume that'll be their chairperson at the association level, but they did indicate to me by email that they were in general agreement with the terms of the MOU, the draft MOU that we proposed. So might just need a final little review, as long as you're generally supportive of the general terms. They wouldn't change much before signatures.
Well, I would say this is incredibly important because, when you have a grass fire, and if we have the 70-mile-an-hour winds, that grass fire can move so fast. And definitely, I know when we get a fire over in Morrow County, how all the ranchers go out with their equipment, and that does make the difference, and can they get things stopped. I want to recognize that the other day we had Staten firefighters staged at our fairgrounds, and this morning we actually had firefighters from Globe, and I said, well, where's Globe? They're actually from Arizona here, staged in Sisters in case we have a fire. And she goes, well, we're doing pretty well. And I go, no. We actually have had some fires in September that were not expected quite a few years ago. So I go, you can't, please always be aware and report any time you see smoke.
Great. So are you asking for
It looks like
approval today or possible?
signature?
Yeah.
I move that we approve a contribution to the Brothers Hampton Rangeland Fire Protection District and authorize county administrator signature on document 2021-691.
I second the motion.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Dare,
Yes.
and Chair votes yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan.
All right, thank you.
Item number 23, progress update for Senate Bill 762, which is wildfire hazard mitigation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Kyle Collins, Associate Planner. I believe we also have Ed Keith, our County Forester, on the line to help answer any questions. I'm going to go through a very brief presentation to cover some of the major changes and updates that have happened related to Senate Bill 762, and then we can just open it up to a general discussion. So to cover some of the main basics to fill everyone in again, this is related to Senate Bill 762, which is our new statewide wildfire hazard mitigation bill. It was passed in June of this year. There are multiple components of the bill that require action by state agencies before any type of local action can be undertaken and we can start implementing some of these policies at the county level. And then there are going to be opportunities throughout those state level actions, however, where counties and other local jurisdictions can provide input. So one of the major state level actions that has occurred to this point is the creation of two rulemaking advisory committees that are convened by the Oregon Department of Forestry, and they're specifically related to development standards and wildfire mitigation, which are the two big areas that we've talked about most thus far related to 762. So the first rulemaking advisory committee was convened to establish a definition of wildland urban interface, which is one of the primary pieces of language included in the bill. That'll ultimately be filtered out into the second big item here, which is the creation of a wildfire risk map for all properties throughout the state of Oregon. And that's what that secondary rulemaking advisory committee has been working on. So in relation to the Wui Definition Committee, they have to define wildland urban interface within 100 days of 762 being signed by the governor, which gives them a deadline of November 7th of this year to actually establish and adopt a final Wui definition. The committee members actually proposed a draft Wui definition just over a week ago on August 17th, and an accompanying report, which is what I'm going to be talking about mostly here today. So the proposed definition that was chosen by the committee in this case is directly linked to the International Code Council's definition for wildland urban interface. And you can see it here in front of you, but it states the geographical area where structures and other human development meets or intermingles with wildland or vegetative fuels. So the RAC members didn't elect to add any additional language to the international code standard or change any of that particular wording, and they just adopted it wholesale. The definition, even though it was proposed and adopted by the committee, it wasn't done through a full consensus by all members. As you can see here, about 16 members were fully supportive of that proposed definition. 2 of the members of the committee were supportive but wanted to see some additional changes made, and then 5 members were not supportive of that proposed definition. So even though there was not a consensus between all members, ultimately there were majority and minority opinions that were factored into that accompanying report along with the proposed definition. So after the proposed draft definition has been implemented, that same rulemaking advisory committee is going to come together on September the 7th to discuss a variety of topics associated with the draft definition. But some of the big things that came up during all of the meetings leading up to this date were the specific terminology utilized in the Wui definition. So all of the members wanted to point out that there are additional meetings that are going to have to take place to specifically outline what is meant by some of this language that's included in that draft definition. Things like structures, human development, and wildland fuels. Most likely almost every single word other than things like buts and ands is going to be picked apart in coming meetings to actually establish what ODF means when we're talking about structures in particular and how that might govern regulations moving forward. So as a draft definition has been put forward, the Oregon Department of Forestry has proposed 3 separate public hearings to take public input on what this draft definition is before final adoption. You can see all the dates here in front of you. They're all towards the end of September, September 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. All of those public hearings are going to be conducted virtually, so via Zoom. And if the board wants, they can provide comments on this draft Wui definition during any of those specific public hearing dates, or there's an opportunity to submit comments both before and after those public hearing dates if they want to get something in writing ahead of time. And you can see the email address here, which I'll follow up and send to all the board members if they elect to move forward with that route. The second rulemaking advisory committee is specifically related to the risk mapping piece of all this. They began meeting on August 5th of this year, and they're meeting every other week in a very similar manner to the first advisory committee. The draft rules for how the statewide wildfire risk map is ultimately going to be put together have to be finalized by February of next year. And then there's going to be a public hearings process, much in the same way as this draft Wui definition process, to discuss what those risk mapping rules are in April of next year. And then the Board of Forestry will ultimately draft those mapping rules in March of 2022, and then finally everything will be adopted in June of 2022. So that's actually when we expect not only a final definition of Wui to be incorporated into the risk maps, but the risk maps themselves should be finalized by the end of June of next year. Here is a graphic we pulled from one of the rulemaking advisory committees. It's not the best text, unfortunately, but you can see this is a timeline breakdown of some of the major milestones that are coming up. In red, you can see kind of where we are right here towards the end of August, and I've highlighted that the public hearings associated with the Wui definition advisory committee are to begin next month. Some of the big things that are coming afterwards is the Board of Forestry ideally intends to approve a final Wui definition sometime in October, even though technically, as I stated earlier, they have until the beginning of November to actually put that into place based on the language in 762. And then there'll be several more months of meetings between these rulemaking advisory committees associated with the risk mapping piece. And then ideally, somewhere in February of next year, they'll both be combined into this larger open-ended process where the board would have an additional opportunity to provide comments related to not only the definition of itself, but how it's integrated into the wildfire risk mapping piece. And then if they want to provide comments on the mapping itself, there'll be opportunities again in the first half approximately of next year.
Kyle, last
Yes.
evening, actually, Nick and I had the privilege of being with Roger Johnson, who's on the committee, and he said, "Don't worry, Patty, we are meeting every week and we are making progress." So we got that message firsthand, I believe, last night.
Gotcha. That's good to hear. Yeah, these are all, some of these targets are legislated in 762, so there's always the possibility that things happen more quickly, but these are just what they have come up with as of this particular timeline came out as of last week. This is still, I think, kind of what they're working with on the interim, but even though technically June is really when everything is mandated to come out, it is always possible that these things happen more quickly. So just next steps with those two big updates out of the way. So as I pointed out earlier, the board can start coordinating with staff at this point if they want to provide any comments, particularly related to that draft Wui definition that's been proposed by the Rulemaking Advisory Committee. Again, the board is welcome to submit comments in writing to that email address directed to the Board of Forestry directly, or they can elect to provide comments during one of those 3 public hearings on the 3rd week of September if they elect to do so. Staff's going to continue to provide updates to the board as some of these state level actions come forward, and particularly those points in which there's opportunities for any type of citizen comment or local involvement at the county level. And with that, I can just open it up to any general questions from the board.
You pull up that slide with the definition of Wui, the proposed definition.
Of course. Could we bring the presentation back up one more time, please? Thank you.
We can home in on those 3 words, too.
Yeah, so that, and I'm just kind of getting back to the
Structures, human development, fuels. Were those the 3 that you were,
3
the
words
3
are pulled out
phrases
of
that
this statement.
you were thinking were going to get picked apart?
I think those are the most likely to be picked apart based on comments that were brought up during the RACS meeting, last meeting on the 17th. However, as I stated earlier, I think literally every portion of this is likely to be picked apart in these subsequent meetings. So geographical area, I'm sure will generate a lot of discussion. The structures, obviously, we've already brought out. Even the idea of intermingles, what does that mean? Does that mean literally within, or is it something more just adjacent to in some definition? And so I think this is probably going to be sort of a slog, line by line, figuring out directly what ODF's expectations are and what the expectations by the Rulemaking Advisory Committee, and then possibly some public input around whatever's finalized.
So this is the International Code Council's Wui definition?
Correct.
That is right there. So that's the starting point for this effort in the state of Oregon.
Correct.
And so one of my first thoughts is it's really in context of what is this going to mean? As in, we went through a wildland urban interface definition, fire mapping exercise in Deschutes County, and the common ground is it's all there. Which if you go with that concept, what does that mean? And if it means cement siding and construction techniques in defensible space, pretty standard. That, as I say, my conclusion is we kind of do that here. That's the natural place to be. We're probably not going to see any cedar shingles in the future. The market isn't going to do it, and there's regulations for not doing it. So, but then if it's a lot more onerous, you might start debating about, if the wildland urban interface definition is a little different, then I don't have to do those extra things that cost extra money. I'm saying there's two parts to this, the definition and what does that definition require us to do.
Yeah, because in the past, when we talked about Wui, it was the key to getting fuels funding to land in an area. So we wanted to define the Wui as expansively as possible so that we were able to secure more hazardous fuels dollars for our region. But when we're talking about defensible space or building material requirements, people likely think differently.
And to provide a full picture here of where this is likely to come, at least from a state regulatory standpoint. So this is something we brought up to the board previously, is there really, as the members have already pointed out, there really are two big components that are going to come out of this. One is this broad state wildfire risk map, and then areas that are identified as both high or extreme risk within that state map and qualify as a wildland urban interface, whatever that definition happens to shake out as. That's where new regulations are going to come into place, and they're predominantly associated with fire hardening standards, so what your house is built out of, and then defensible space standards, so what type of vegetation you can have in and around whatever structures are ultimately defined as.
Great. Good discussion. Ed, did you have a statement along those lines?
I was just going to recognize that as far as the requirements go, there's several pieces that are yet unknown, and some of them aren't displayed as part of this timeline or process because they actually lie outside the responsibility assigned to the Oregon Department of Forestry even. So the Oregon State Fire Marshal has the task of actually coming up with standards around defensible space that will then correspond with requirements within the WUI, but the actual requirements will only apply to areas risk are mapped on the risk map as high and extreme. So there's lots of these pieces that kind of talk to each other, and actually multiple rulemaking processes, but also multiple agencies. So still, I guess just a lot more to come before some of this becomes ultimately clear what's going to be required. But it does neck down from the WUI to risk classifications. There's 5 risk classifications, and then the top 2 risk classifications being high and extreme. Those are the ones based on Senate Bill 62 that do have those requirements for building codes in defensible space.
Great, thank you.
Of course. Like I said, I will follow up with the board. Ed and myself can start coordinating if any of the commissioners want to provide comments on this upcoming public hearing standards, and then there'll be additional updates in the coming weeks.
Thanks, Kyle.
So is there anyone else from Deschutes County besides Roger on the committee?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Pam Hardy.
Yes.
Oh, Pam.
Pam Hardy from the Western Environmental Law Center is a Deschutes County resident.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe the memo that was provided to the board today shows what the breakdown of that advisory committee that came up with this draft Wui definition, so you can see all the members there.
Kind of in conjunction with this item, or before we wrap this item up, and while we have Ed here, I did want to just pull in some of that ignition source information that I had asked Ed to collect for us, to assemble for us a few months back. And I mean, it is connected, you know. Senate Bill 762 is meant to help protect us from the fires, and the information that Ed's assembled for us tells us where the fires are coming from in the first place in many cases. And Ed, would you like to walk us through this data a little bit, or?
I can sure give it a shot. I'm assuming that you did get a copy of the memo in your inbox, so you have those numbers available to you.
Yes.
But basically what I did was compile the fire cause data that I could. It is spread across multiple agencies, and I just would qualify these numbers as each agency has a slight nuance to the way that they conduct fire investigations and then enter those into their own reporting system. So as much as I could, I tried to summarize those so it provides an overall picture. In summarizing the Wildland Agencies, which is, and these are all fires for the last 10 years, 2011 through 2020. The Wildland Agencies that serve Deschutes County are the Oregon Department of Forestry, the U.S. Forest Service, and the BLM. At a high level, they do, their causes do overlap enough where you can blend those together and still have an accurate set of data. I would say the Oregon Department of Forestry does then further break down these general causes into specific causes, and there's several pages of codes of specific causes. So if you want to dive into any particular specific cause, I'm happy to provide that, but I just tried to provide these at a somewhat high level so they can be compared across protection agencies. Then I did provide a separate table that was data provided to me by the Oregon State Fire Marshal's office. They collect data for the structural fire departments, so the rural fire districts, the city fire districts. We have 9 of those throughout the county. Those are all compiled into these the second table that have quite a bit more detail, but also don't really allow you to blend those causes quite so much into the wildland causes. So that's why they're provided as separate statistics. Specifically, since this request came about after some discussions around fireworks, I did look for fireworks causes. So for the wildland agencies, I found over 10 years, 10 fires caused by fireworks that burned a total of 20 acres. 10 of those was the very well-known fire that was caused by illegal use of fireworks or illegal fireworks on Pilot Butte that burned 10 acres. And then the other 10 burned a total of 10 more acres for the wildland agencies. And then for the structural agencies, they also had data on 10 different fireworks fires throughout those 10 years. So those were the data that I could dig up. I do have a very detailed spreadsheet. If you want me to look into anything further, if you want me to send that along, I'm happy to do so, but I just was trying to summarize this at a higher level.
Ed, I have a question. Do we know what started the Grandview fire?
I still have not heard the finalized cause on that. So.
Okay, I mean, is it really that complicated to come up with that answer, or is it because they're so busy fighting other fires that no one's written the report?
I'm not sure. They have not finalized the cause. For a lot of fires, they will have that cause finalized within a day or two. and others where they need to do more extensive investigation, including potential criminal charges. Sometimes those go on for multiple weeks or months. But it's just determined based on the complications of the particular start.
And some investigations.
It started July 11th, so it's been over a month then.
Some investigations take years to reach a conclusion, and in some cases, there are significant fires that a final cause is never conclusively determined. So I don't know the specifics of the investigation around this fire, but it's not uncommon if if the story is complex for it to take a while. But I'd like to just kind of return to this data and say the reason I asked Ed to kind of delve into ignition sources for wildfires for us was because there was a tremendous amount of focus and concern on fireworks back in the 4th of July timeframe, and based on the information that we have received or that Ed has put together, unless we see, on further investigation that there's a lot more fire attributed to fireworks, I didn't see, I do not see in this data that fireworks are a very significant source of wildfires locally. And if much of the reported activity is actually concentrated around Pilot Butte, then nothing that the county did about fireworks bans or restrictions would have any effect on that. So the city of Bend is taking a serious look at a permanent or much longer term fireworks ban, and that if Pilot Butte is a really key hotspot for those kinds of concerns, sorry, no pun intended, then the city's policy making around this will take care of that Pilot Butte area.
Well, how about sharing this memo with the city council?
If
The Board of Commissioners wanted to share this with you.
Yeah, I mean, Ed, if you feel like this is kind of in the final written form to the point that you'd like it to be in to share with other entities, then I'd support that. If you'd like more time to kind of add details or kind of unpack the fireworks a little bit more, anything else like that, that would make, I'd say that's reasonable too. The city council has, I believe, extended their fireworks ban into December at this point, so there's not a huge rush.
Well, the good news is that Sisters and Sun River already have bans on the books. They've had them for a while, and they really don't want the problem. When you think of what the cost is of having all those forestry people in Sisters right now, they've been there for a while, just in case. Definitely, we, the people, don't need to add to that burden.
And it's quite possible that the numbers that we're looking at are reflective of that. I mean, that the fact that Sisters has a ban and Sun River has a ban means that these numbers are lower. So if it's not a significant concern, then it could be because there are some fireworks bans in place in parts of the county. But if it's not a significant concern, it seems like whatever is being done right now is taking care of the problem to a significant degree. The one other thing I'd say about this data is there's, I also, back in around the 4th of July timeframe, I also said it would be great to understand what are the ignition sources that are major concerns for us, and dig deeper into what we can do to control those more. And the one I was particularly interested in was debris burning, because there are things that the county could be doing to make non-combustion debris disposal even easier or more accessible for county residents. And that also, it's not a huge, I mean, it's, the Wildland Agencies have, 106 fires over 10 years attributed to debris burning. So, I mean, it's not nothing. But I was also wondering if there's anything else on this list that we can do more about. Lightning clearly is not something that we can do anything about. But I mean, if the big one here is recreationists, and I'm assuming that means escape campfires, then yeah, I'm wondering if there's more that could be done to reduce the amount of campfire ignited wildfires in our community. So, it's not something that we need to spend a ton of time on today, but maybe over the fall and winter when fire season has wound down, we could take a deeper dive into some of this information and try and think about what else we can do to get ignition sources under control in our community.
In the fall, when cleanup fire season winds up, that's, there's a different way to look at that. Because, there are two instances in my neighborhood of fires like that, and one of them took a house and the other one just went across the whole prairie or whatever. So, I mean, it does happen.
Yeah. And some of these categories, like I don't claim to understand to understand what's behind the title or the category, hot ember or ash. I was like, well, tell me the story behind that. What does that mean? So I would really like to spend some more time digging into this ignition source information and learning what we can about what more we can do to prevent wildfires in our community.
And the closest situation I had personally, just a cleanup fire in my property, and I had some cardboard to put on the fire. So it was a flat piece of cardboard. It kind of got rounded off, and it was all on flame. And just a little puff of wind, poof, and the flat piece of cardboard flipped over into the grass that was pretty far away. But I was standing there, and I had to rake it out. But, I mean, I've seen it. It's scary when that happens. Okay. So, I mean, if there's action items that pop up from any of these areas, like Ed, you're already probably looking down the list, thinking, what's a effort that we could put in place that might at least remind people how to do less of this, how to make fires start less in this category. So if there's anything like that, that's fine. That'd be a good effort we could come up with.
Yeah, I think, we could have a further conversation with the structural districts within, ODF and the federal agencies. They are able to issue their own regulations. So ODF does ban fireworks usually before July 4th for their fire protection district. They do ban, debris burning. Fire districts regulate debris burning, but there's other causes that they may not be able to regulate, or they'd like to be able to regulate across the entire county, coordinated across the fire district. So I would say instead of potentially narrowing in on one cause, like the proclamation that we, regulations that we enact for the unprotected lands are kind of a comprehensive list of the things that we know cause fires throughout the fire season that can be prevented. Some just come from accidents. You get in a car wreck and the car starts on fire. But a lot of the common causes that can be prevented are found on our unprotected lands regulations, and we've We've in the past refrained from enacting those over the structural fire districts, but we could talk to them about doing that potentially on a countywide basis based on some sort of fire danger threshold, so that it applies countywide instead of just to the unprotected lands and ODF lands. So that's one possibility.
That sounds great. Yeah, having maybe getting together with the structural, having some kind of a meeting with structural agencies and this data, and talking about ignition. I mean, there's SB 762 gets us really far on flammability of our landscape and our community, but it doesn't really deal that much with ignition sources. Besides the power lines, that's one thing I know that SB 762 dealt with specifically, but we could take a look at a lot of these other issues.
Well, and remember, one of the scenarios that I think of is the aggressive extermination of fires for 100 years has put us in an unhealthy spot. So, it isn't all doom and gloom. My point is, if there's opened up understory forest managed areas and we have low intensity cleanup fires that used to naturally go through more than 100 years ago, that's a whole different scenario than we're in today. So I see you nodding yes. I mean, because the definition of what we're dealing with today is not nominal from 100 years ago. That's all I'm saying. Okay, anything else?
I don't believe so.
Thank you for the update. It's good to understand the debate. Just a couple words in a sentence, but it's going to be really scrutinized for the next couple of weeks, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Item number 24, Terrebonne wastewater feasibility study update. There's a presentation available for this. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Board. Chris Doty, Road Department again.
This is utilizing your previous credentials as a utility manager at the
I guess so.
city.
I thought I was through with this.
Yeah.
Everything comes back around, I guess.
There you go.
You can take
Thank
the
you.
Public Works Director out
Yep,
of
there
the
was
Public
it,
Works
yeah.
Department, but you can't take the
Should have
something.
advocated for a title change long ago, but.
Yep.
Anyway, Board, it's great to be here to update you on the Terrebonne wastewater feasibility study that we've been working with the community of Terrebonne for a little over a year now. Should have some folks joining the call, perhaps intermittently between now and 2 o'clock when I told them to sign on. So as they come on, perhaps we can introduce them as they come on board. But behind me is Guy Vernon. You remember Mr. Vernon from, really the onset of the advocacy of updating this feasibility study to explore, wastewater system for the community based on needs that he's experienced, other needs in the community that he heard as he kind of walked the petition through the community a little over 2 years ago, I think, to kind of get a sense of people's interest in this. So with that, Guy is here. We should have some folks from Parametrics online, perhaps, and available for answering questions. Ryan Rudnick, just saw his name flash up there. So he's available to answer questions. He's more of the technical expert. The gentleman's done a lot of the groundwork on this project, and I'm here to just kind of give you that 30,000-foot update. If you have any questions about how wastewater works, he's your guy. We'll defer to Ryan.
Great.
Let's see if I can forward the slide. So, a little bit of background. The purpose of this study is to really modernize the feasibility analysis and provide a roadmap for the community of Terrebonne to take the steps towards forming a sanitary district, essentially, to enable a wastewater system to be developed within the community to meet existing needs. A little bit of background, there was a study in 1984 that took a look at wastewater in Terrebonne. At the time, it was determined it wasn't immediately necessary, just based on how systems were functioning, a whole different set of rules back in the 80s about how to dispose of wastewater, and so it didn't have any traction. In 1999, the Water District actually commissioned a study with fear just regarding the fact that, you have a lot of septic and drill holes in the community. Is that, what's the potential for that to cause issues with water quality? And then and then the need to deal with that through a sanitary district. And so at the time, the study did prove out it was feasible. It could have been done, but it just didn't for whatever reason, based on the synergy within the community and the perceived need of it at that time. So it sat there for 20 years as a feasible option, but nothing happened. And so flash forward to now, technology has changed, opportunities have presented themselves in Terrebonne. We're going to talk about those a little bit. But why now? Again, the property owners, asked the board to dust off that study previously commissioned by the Water District and update it. There have been significant failure rates in the community at twice the average of what we're seeing in other parts of Deschutes County, as reported by environmental folks, Todd Cleveland and his group. And then there's been a few significant commercial and business issues in that commercial core area with septic system failures and or pretty extraordinary investments they've had to make to get their systems patched up and working. And so I want to say that you probably heard from a property owner recently regarding, the issues they're having, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and really having nothing to show for it yet. So high profile. In terms of the feasibility scope, just kind of walk you through some of the things that we asked the consultant to do as a part of this feasibility analysis. And I will say that as this project has progressed, we've had to pivot a few times just based on the fact that, instead of being a feasibility analysis, we have opportunities presenting themselves that we'll get into that really are starting to give this a little more forward momentum. Such that, we are making progress, I think, towards actually, getting it going rather than just studying it and letting it sit there for another 20 years. So we've really kind of altered the scope a little bit to look at emerging opportunities. But the scope items of the study were, really gather the existing septic system data. If we want to show the community this is necessary, we're going to need to tell them why. And so, we've done that and basically, captured the fact that Terrebonne is having issues, inordinate amount of issues with the septic. Item number 2, develop wastewater collection treatment options for consideration. So what can be done in terms of a wastewater system in the community? As a part of that, of course, estimate capital cost, maintenance operations, and then develop a rate model. When you're talking to people in Terrebonne, this is the first question, that they have. Everybody's, somewhat generally supportive, but it's, qualified. How much is it going to cost? How much is it going to cost on a monthly rate basis? How much will it cost me to hook up? So that's a part of this feasibility study. Evaluating the governance options is a big part as well, and they're kind of limited, but, again, we're providing that roadmap for the community to, develop that sanitary district and govern it accordingly. Number 5, work with community stakeholders. So Mr. Vernon and his group have been a part of some folks that we've targeted and kind of made an informal sewer advisory group out of, the commercial property owners in Terrebonne. And so we've been working with them as, we're starting to really refine the concepts and come up with a plan to move forward. And then finally, number 6 is to deliver a preliminary engineering report. And that's kind of a technical document that will be necessary eventually to present to funding agencies and programs as they seek to possibly pursue grant funding to help fund the project. So that's more of a technical document that will come at the tail end of this. Regarding existing septic system performance in the community, Terrebonne is sitting on some rock. I think we all know that, and it's shallow depth of soils, and so that's not a good environment for septic systems to operate, certainly in a long-term sustainable manner. They're older systems, and as such, the soil permeability is decreasing. There are many drill holes in the community. Drill hole is basically a dry well where the septic effluent just goes right down a hole, which you can imagine would be particularly concerning to water quality. Again, the repair rate is twice that of elsewhere in Deschutes County, and again, we're seeing failures that that are very, very costly to some very important businesses locally. As we're putting together options for how to, craft a system that will work, we've taken a look at various phases, and we've put phases together. And there's 3 phases that kind of separate themselves in the community. And the first one, phase A, is the commercial core. And there are 110 equivalent dwelling units. That's a sewer capacity terminology. Basically, equivalent dwelling unit is how much one dwelling unit would typically generate. So business is going to generate multiples of equivalent dwelling units, whereas a single-family home is one. So the commercial core has 110 EDUs, but the potential for 360 almost at build out or realization of some more commercial development in the town. So basically that's just the commercial property, and that's where we're seeing the biggest issues, the costliest issues, more motivated property owners. Obviously, Mr. Vernon and his group, really need this to happen. And in terms of phasing for an eventual sanitary district formation, this would be some low-hanging fruit. If we drew the district boundary around phase A, it would probably have a great chance of success in moving forward, as long as we can demonstrate that it's a feasible standalone phase that can be added onto in the future, which the study does. Residential west is phase B, and those are basically the residential properties west of the commercial core. That's kind of your second priority issue area within the community. Those are smaller lots, as you can see. That's probably where the majority of the drill holes are located. They don't have as many drain field options in terms of repair or secondary choice. And so that's what we've identified as phase B. Phase C would be the residential properties east of downtown. Larger lots, newer systems, more backup area for drain field. Should their drain field fail, they can have reserve options, basically. So we see that as kind of the lowest priority in the community, although I'm sure there are some higher priority individual lots in there.
So Chris, we actually then have Angus Acres and Terrebonne Estates as having their own systems.
That's correct.
Those are the only 2, correct?
That is correct. Those are the only 2. That said, I think they would appreciate the ability to hook into a more formal municipal type system in the future, just because they're encountering, I think, the same types of issues everyone else in Terrebonne is with regards to performance of septic systems.
Could I just ask about those 2? So those are the ones that are on existing sewer. So what kind of systems do they have?
I believe they're probably similar, smaller scale systems to the ones that we're going to talk about for the community. I'm assuming, I believe they're a step system. They're septic tanks that then drain effluent to a centralized treatment and disposal area.
And where is that centralized treatment and disposal area?
So for Terrebonne Estates, I believe it's located in the northwest area, kind of probably that undeveloped lot. And Ryan, feel free to chime in here if you're listening and can provide some detail to that question. As far as Angus Acres, I believe there's a vacant lot where it's disposed of in a drain field. I'm looking at Ryan. He agrees. Okay.
Well, and those are DEQ managed authorized systems, a little bit bigger scale.
Correct. Go ahead, Ryan.
There's dispersed areas that are across several lots, and so it's kind of shared drain field across multiple properties. It's not a single location, so it's more dispersed.
Looks like you may have to, not enough bandwidth today for your connection.
So Ryan, we're getting a
We're trying.
digitized version there,
Yep.
so we could get the presentation back up. That'd be great. But we could certainly, Commissioner, provide you more detail, of exactly where those systems are at and how they're operating. We know they exist, and that I believe they've had some issues from time to time, but for the most part, function, as designed. And similar to what we're going to hear in terms of options. So in terms of alternatives for the community, we looked at three primary alternatives. They're all what we call a step system. That's septic tank, effluent pump. And so the graphic on the right kind of shows a slice of how a step system works. You basically have a septic tank on your lot, just like everyone does there today. You have a pump on that septic tank that then pumps that effluent into actually a small diameter pressure line out in the street, and that's your collection system. The combined force of all the pumps pumping their effluent pushes that wastewater to a centralized location, pumps it to where it's treated. This is a very common system for retrofits like what we're doing here in this community. Very common system where you can't serve it with gravity. Very common system where you're built on rock and it costs a tremendous amount to excavate and build deeper gravity sewer. So in terms of Terrebonne, this is kind of the obvious choice for this type of system coming into a community from nothing, so to speak. So that's a step system. So the alternative one, though, is utilizing a lagoon system. So essentially your step system pumps into a collection system that then disposes of that effluent in various lagoons that have to be sited someplace in the community, most likely to the west or northwest of Terrebonne. We've kind of picked some locations just graphically, but as a part of the study, we did not explore contacting property owners and getting into specifics. We just kind of held that as a starting point, more or less, and made some assumptions around cost. So this would be a traditional lagoon system. The pros with this type of system is that it's proven and low risk. There's these types of systems all over the country, all over the world. The cons is that, again, it does require land acquisition, and there are some treatment complexities in terms of a small district that has to, own and operate, a lagoon system, permitting and whatnot. So those are those two cons. Now, this is about $18.7 million full build-out, and that price includes the full build-out of those estimated 1,000 equivalent dwelling units that Terrebonne could potentially grow into in the future. So in all these scenarios, we've sized it and costed it based on the fact that you put a sewer system into an area that's probably going to spur a little bit of development. We want to size the piping and the infrastructure to accommodate the maximum, anticipated development at build-out of the unincorporated boundary. So $18.7 million includes all the septic tanks and pump stations that would be necessary that perhaps would be funded by property owners, but that just gives you a sense of the total cost. Alternative two is a little more modern approach. It's a package treatment plant with a drain field disposal. And so very similar to the lagoon system, however, instead of using lagoons to treat the effluent is pumped to and through a small package treatment plant that could be sited, either in the community or out perhaps near the disposal area. And so this is just modern technology that will, treat the effluent. And with that, you don't need lagoons. You can dispose of the effluent in a drain field. And so you don't have that, perhaps, some of the concern we heard regarding lagoons was, one, about having to buy a large parcel. Two, the fact that the wind blows from west to east and, you have lagoons basically wafting across the community as a result of having a lagoon system potentially. So a drain field disposal would be a positive thing. However, this was a $21.6 million option, again, full build out with 1,000 plus EDU. Pros is that it's a smaller land footprint because you don't have to purchase land for lagoons. And you have drain field disposal, so it's subsurface rather than on the surface itself. Cons are the capital costs. This is the most expensive option. Some land acquisition is required. And then again, there's probably more treatment complexities with owning and operating package plants than there is with with a lagoon system, or our third option, which is the step system pumping to the new Redmond Wetlands Complex. So here's one of those little things that popped up along the way that caused us to think and pivot a little bit. Redmond is actually relocating their wastewater treatment plant from the north end of the community in the Dry Canyon all the way out to the land disposal area where they dispose of their treated wastewater, which is off Northwest Way. I'll show you a graphic of that here in a second, give you a sense of where it's at. But it's closer to Terrebonne than it is to most of Redmond. And so from that aspect, it makes a lot of sense. Instead of building treatment infrastructure for communities so close together, can we pump straight into their treatment complex?
Chris, how far is that? I mean, what kind of linear?
A little less than 3 miles. One of the positive elements of the modern step system, those little pumps that you have attached to your septic tanks, they can pump up to 10 miles. And so if you can site treatment infrastructure inside of that radius, it's those little systems can push it that far. Redmond has been gracious enough to entertain the thought of this. It's something that they didn't ask for. We asked would you mind if we talk to you about this? They've been very open and accommodating, and I think they see the positive environmental aspect of this and the efficiencies of it. And since they're in the midst of designing, this new project, it just makes great sense to, consider Terrebonne as a part of that as well. And so, because of that, this option is $17.1 million. So there's no land acquisition, there's no treatment infrastructure directly for this system. That said, we'll need to, we will be funding some of that capacity in that plant, in Redmond's process, I should say. So the pros is that this has the lowest capital cost. It's treatment by others, and so that reduces the complexities for a small sanitary district to have to worry about DEQ permitting and things of that nature. And again, there's no land acquisition required for disposal. It's already would be pumping into a facility that is existing or will be existing and operated by others. The cons is that there is additional piping required. It's 3 miles away, and we need to pump to that. And potentially there's higher operation and maintenance costs, although we've had to make some estimates. And those estimates that we've made have resulted in slightly higher operations and maintenance costs for this plan than the other two. That said, as we're working with Redmond on refining, hey, we need this many gallons per day processed. We're going to have this many EDUs on this type of schedule. As we're working with them, they're designing their plant. We're hoping to refine those costs and hopeful that they can come down such that we could even have a wash in terms of O&M or potentially even cheaper costs associated with the Redmond concept than with the other two.
And in the write-up that you developed, the staff report that you developed for this item, there was a kind of table vision, and I'm sorry, maybe this is farther into the PowerPoint, but one of the things I was curious about was the patrons or the utility members who are tied into this system will be paying monthly fees, and I was curious whether those fees were basically intended to support the processing and routine maintenance for the Redmond plant, or whether there was adequate, whether Redmond would essentially be collecting funds from these utility ratepayers to, for the long-term maintenance of all the pipe back to where they were and the step, and in the long term replacement costs for infrastructure in the Terrebonne zone as well, or whether the fees paid to Redmond would really be about what was necessary to keep the plant running.
Yeah. So in order not to scare them off, we've kind of conceptualized the thought that that we would be a single user. This district would be a single user to the city of Redmond that would pump directly into the plant.
Okay.
The district would be formed. District would handle its own billings. It would then take whatever treatment cost on a monthly basis that is charged by the city of Redmond and find a methodology to equitably distribute that to all the users in the district. The district would be in charge of all the piping and really all the way to the septic tank itself and probably the pump maintenance on that because those systems have to be maintained regularly in order to operate efficiently. You can't just let the homeowner pump it on their own and then before you know it, you've got stuff that shouldn't be in the pipes, right? So the concept that we've envisioned is this district is a single user, but runs its own utility in terms of everything else. So there's what you pay Redmond, then there's, as a part of your rate, your monthly rate, and then there's the operation and maintenance just of the piping system that the district would own, replacement costs, capital funds for future replacement, whatever staffing costs for billing and so on and so forth. So that's kind of how we built the model. We'll touch on that here in a little bit.
So yeah, what one of my concerns will be that district is collecting enough fees and rates to ensure that they can do all of the operation and maintenance of the pipes and the septic and replace components of that as the need arises because I was sharing with the other two commissioners that I've seen many community water systems that don't allocate, basically don't charge themselves enough to adequately maintain their system, and then 20 years down the line, their system is failing, and they've built up they've saved nothing towards the replacement that's needed, and then essentially you have a community water system in ruin at a certain point. So you want to, I would want to be very sure that the long-term view is built into the rate structure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've made assumptions and accounted for that as we put together the rate model for this, and I can walk you through that a little bit, but the assurance is that we've factored in not just the O&M, but future replacement, a small part of that for bonding capacity to then do the next phase, and so on and so forth. So that's the sweet science of this type of work, and this consultant team we have is, this is, what they've done in a few spots, especially for resorts, who, are probably our closest example to this type of system, building a utility company around, wastewater collection and whatnot.
Great, thank you.
According to your schedule of Phase A, your operating reserve is 1.1 million. So that sounds like a pretty healthy reserve.
Yeah, so it in Phase A, it gets pretty thin. We don't have a lot of bonding capacity in the model that we've developed. We'll get into the details of maybe how that works here in a few slides. Other options that we looked at, and I kind of alluded to this already, gravity sewer. This was studied in 1999, and there's no magic technology that's made it easier to slice rock in the 20-plus years that we've come. Plus, just the impact of the community. Deeper trenches are wider at the top, and certainly would really tear up the town. And we looked at cluster concepts. That was one thing that we wanted to focus on a little bit, small bites of the apple. And, with clusters, you still have to get rid of the water, ultimately. And finding disposal areas to serve clustered areas became kind of difficult, and just looking at availability of property, knowing that property could develop, and not wanting to encumber this and that. So quickly, that cluster concept kind of snowballed into the phasing concept that we have here today with the 3 primary phases. So here's a picture of the preferred alternative, and both in conversations with the sewer advisory group that we've been working with, and then as the consultant team develop some criteria. The Redmond complex, is the preferred alternative, and we've had brief conversations, but as we put the preliminary engineering report together, we'll need to double back and ratify some of those a little bit more. But again, the Redmond Wetlands Complex is opening in 2025. This plan would avoid us having to have the district acquire any property for lagoons themselves that would be controversial. We know Terrebonne just loves controversy and great spirited conversations as a community. This would avoid some of that. It's practical and achievable with step technology, efficient pumps that allow you to pump to this facility without much burden. It does require an agreement with the city, and we'll talk about that when we get to next steps. But as you can see, it's a pretty short distance. The northern Redmond city limits are just off the screen here, and so when you think about that being the northern part of Redmond, and by the time you get to Highland, well, Terrebonne, all of Terrebonne's closer to this facility than Highland. So, what Redmond is proposing in their wetlands complex is a lot like what the city of Prineville just did. It's a more natural treatment using lagoons and wetlands to treat and then return treated waste effluent back to the earth, so to speak, and it creates great opportunities for other public use as well, trails and other things. So very successful project that the city of Prineville pulled off. The same concepts being discussed here.
When did they pull this off, Chris?
I would say probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And if you're ever interested in taking a look at it, I could arrange a tour.
Okay.
Yeah.
It does require, it requires a substantial amount of space, but
It does. Yep.
Redmond looking ahead at this moment, at this window of, they're in a window of time where you could find that kind of space right now. It'd be hard to.
Yeah, and they've had the disposal area. There's BLM property that would be acquired or leased or utilized in some manner for this as well. That's available, and so it's has a lot of positive things about it, a lot of synergy, and you get the wastewater treatment plant out of the city, which is for some of the reasons we're citing in its proximity to Terrebonne and smells, and with the way the wind blows, it shifts that to a better place.
And the Prineville project, it really does, it is an incredible park amenity for the city, the residents of the city of Prineville at this point, as well as providing all sorts of neat wetland habitat for migratory birds and other stuff.
Yeah. So our agreement with the city would function on two things. One, they're going to have to over-design their project here to account for additional capacity from Terrebonne. It would equate to about a 5% increase in flow into their treatment area. And so that doesn't come for free. That's something we have to talk about and identify how we could pay that back. Plus the rate. Let's talk about a rate methodology so that we can refine that and have good information as we take the next step. But how do we basically make it fair and equitable for the city of Redmond to process Terrebonne's effluent, for Terrebonne to get the best rate possible to pencil this concept out. So having looked at the alternatives, kind of selected, drawn to a preferred alternative, we took a look at capital cost and rate estimates. And the way you kind of go about rate modeling for a new system like this, and it's kind of in line with what was done in 1999 as well. You pick a rate that you think the community can support. And in that guidance, some of the funding agencies that we would go to for grant, potentially loan funds, they want to see the community have a rate of a certain amount as well. They want skin in the game. And so the minimum rate necessary to qualify for some funding is $65 a month per EDU. And so that's on the higher side. That's probably twice what Redmond pays. That's a little bit north of what the City of Bend folks pay. But that again, this is it's going to be costly because we're starting from scratch here. And in that, we've assumed made another assumption. What's a connection fee? and then both for, to connect to the system, and then what's the capital fee going to be in terms of the treatment piece. So how much do we kick to the city of Redmond to accommodate, to add that capacity in their treatment process? So we've aligned those costs. We've assumed $10,000 per EDU. $8,000 is about what it costs for a new septic tank installed with the pump package. And so that would be a property owner cost. On top of that, $2,000 per EDU is about what we're hearing the cost is to the city of Redmond to add that capacity into their treatment process. And so that's about a $10,000 connection fee, but really it's you're paying for what is being replaced on your property itself. $10,000 is about what it's going to cost to get that septic tank in and get rid of that drain field by pumping it away. Now, in doing that, of course, we calculate, the ability of that rate on a certain amount of ratepayers to generate funding, accounting for the O&M costs, accounting for capital replacement, accounting for administrative costs, and then additional reserves, so on and so forth. We would be looking at the need for grant funding to fund about 85% of Phase A. And that is a pretty high percent of grant funding for any project, let alone wastewater systems, which are probably more in the 50% plus or minus range. And so that's kind of where we sit with the assumptions we made. It's a pretty high grant percentage. Yet, you don't see a lot of these systems from scratch being started in developed communities. We're hopeful to tap into resources. I heard this thing called ARPA that's of interest and perhaps available. We'll talk about that more here in a second. And, there could be an alignment of the stars, so to speak, such that between, federal programs that we've heard in infrastructure packages, between perhaps, the desire for this project to compete very well at the state level for funds, ARPA probably needs to happen in a pretty significant way to kind of give this thing the momentum to get going, because we have a lot of near-term costs that will probably arrive. We'll need to address before the sanitary district can even be formed. There's 85% is just probably, where it needs to be to get it to work for the community on the rate side. And again, it relies on a lot of other people's money to help fund the Phase A. Phase B and C, the thought would be they require less grant funding because as we're bringing users on, we're developing more rate revenue. As we develop more rate revenue, that's a higher bonding capacity to where we can, the district could potentially borrow for funds to build additional phases, such that probably Phase B is maybe in the 50% range. Phase C is even less than that, possibly very limited grant funding at all by the time you get to Phase C if you're able to borrow. So in terms of capital funding, and this pulls out, the septic tank and pump package and the treatment contribution. So this is basically pipe in the ground from the wastewater treatment plant, Redmond's new wetlands complex, to all the frontages of all the homes in Phase A. So we're looking at about $4.3 million necessary for all that piping. In 2025, that'd be the first phase. The second phase, Phase B, would be, the way we've just modeled it, a 2032 type project at 4.6. Phase C, 7 years after that at, a little south of 3.5 million. So it's about a 12.4 million. And again, this is based on the EDUs that are there today, plus some growth. It's not the full build out that we used to compare alternatives when we did the alternatives analysis. So governance options, it really kind of comes down to formation of a sanitary district, and we've utilized county legal to kind of help us understand what's involved with that. At first, it would involve filing a prospective petition with the county clerk and an economic feasibility analysis. A lot of that, of course, is what we're doing right now and putting together this study. Submit a petition with required number of signatures to the clerk. And this is where, you know, the local leadership, we're calling them champions. We need champions within the community here to say, yeah, we need it. I'm willing to serve and be a part of a sanitary district, perhaps help lead it. You know, we're hoping that folks emerge as we begin to talk more about this project and people become more comfortable with it. Again, Deschutes County is not a utility provider. We're simply creating this roadmap for the community to latch onto and move forward. There's 2 hearings that are required as part of the formation steps, and basically that's to make sure the community knows about it and give them an opportunity to request an election to where it actually goes, you know, there's an election held within the district boundaries. If there is no election requested by a certain amount of percent of property owners within the time frame of those various hearings, the board can actually approve the sanitary district by board order. So it's a process, but one that's certainly been done for practically every district that's been formed in this state. This all complies with state law direction. So phase A, we strategically crafted that around the commercial core because we think it gives us the smoothest way to develop that community consensus. It'd be those property owners voting on the district. The study basically shows that it can be a functioning utility just as phase A with all the commercial properties. And so phase B and C could then annex in the future, you know, as needed. We only know what's going to happen with time and septic performance. And so, you know, there's synergy involved with building phase A and, you know, stubbing lines such that, you know, it could develop in one large annexation, or it could go frontage by frontage as folks need to hook into sewer to offset their septic. We did look at private ownership options, public-private partnership. What complicates that in a lot of ways is the fact that we need a lot of grant funding to build this, and so we can't go and immediately sell it or give it away to a private operator to operate and own. And so those options get a little murky out of the gate. Perhaps in the future, you know, those would be available. Now, the likelihood is that this district is formed. They don't hire any employees, buy trucks, do this or that. They contract the maintenance such that there's a contractor that will come in and maintain everything. And the district, as a board, will be, you know, writing checks and collecting revenue and paying for those things. Talked a little bit about the stakeholder group. We initially, you know, had an open house in the fall of 2020, about a year ago. From that, we got some good information from folks in the community. Of course, everyone wants to know right away how much it costs and to hook up and how much it'll cost on a monthly basis. We've done that work now. We feel pretty good about, hey, this is the model that we're floating out there. You know, here's all the caveats with it, but you know, this is what we're looking at, so we can answer some of those questions. But again, we've recruited stakeholders specific, you know, to that commercial core area, because those are the folks that have put hundreds of thousands of dollars into solutions that aren't necessarily working that great, if at all right now. And there's potential significant losses to the community if we take too long, you know, to try to get this thing formed up as a whole community project. It really needs to happen in that commercial core, you know, based on what we're hearing from property owners and what I think the board's heard recently as well. And Mr. Vernon would be happy to answer any questions or speak with you here at the end, have a little Q&A about Terrebonne and about this project. Next steps, we need to complete the feasibility study and preliminary engineering report. We're basically, you know, ready to put a bow on that. The sanitary district needs to be initiated. And that's where we're recruiting and working with this advisory group and others as word gets out that, you know, this opportunity, this project has legs potentially, especially if there are ARPA funds attached to it. We need to negotiate the MOU or intergovernmental agreement with the city of Redmond to commit to those parameters around serving Terrebonne and about how to pay for that. And I want to thank them again publicly for their willingness to do that. They don't have to, but their staff at least has shown you know, great willingness to recognize the fact that this is just what makes sense for the public. And so, so we'll need to do that. And Deschutes County will be doing that on behalf of a future sanitary district. Again, because, the sanitary district's going to take a little time to form. City of Redmond kind of needs some answers right away as they're designing this project. Advocate for funding, that's certainly, what this project is here to do today a little bit, kind of answer some questions you may have about, what potentially, how it could be a good ARPA investment opportunity for the board. But then other traditional sources, if we can get the team going, get that preliminary engineering report done and start shopping that to the various funding agencies, and we'll talk about them here in a second, we could also, hopefully get to that 85%. And then finally, we're working with City of Redmond on a lot of these details. We've got another government partner here in ODOT that's going to be building 11th Street for us, doing work on 97. Phase A basically is commercial core, and it is 11th Street and is 97 and the side streets as well. Last thing we want to do is build the ODOT project without pipe in the ground if this project has momentum and legs to happen within the next few years. And so that's going to be a cost for somebody. It's going to be way before the district is formed. But, there's probably $1 million, in piping that needs to go in the ground and system that needs to be designed. And so, here comes, that opportunity as, an investment for ARPA.
And Chris, can you, will this collection pipe run right down the middle of 11th, or is it going to on an edge, or?
We're not down to that level of detail yet. Traditionally, gravity sewer is right down the middle of the road because you got manholes. Right. In this case, there won't be manholes. There'll just be service connections and ports, and so not at that level of detail yet, but probably in a location that just makes sense based on other utility conflicts in the area and what have you.
But you absolutely want to coordinate this with the road work that's going to happen on 11th.
Ideally, it's we hand ODOT a design. They incorporate that into their design package. It gets paid for, through somebody, not ODOT, not the road department. So, that's a question we have to answer here if we're willing to do that.
You don't have an extra $4.2 million?
Yeah.
Well, it's spoken for.
Yep.
And also it's prohibited by state constitution from spending
darn.
the gas tax dollars on utilities, unfortunately, or fortunately. All right, so funding options, ARPA, again, it's key to really, I think, incentivize formation of that sanitary district in the community. There's costs associated with upfront costs with the petitioning process. You need to hire an attorney. You need a lot of legal advice and hand-holding through that process. There's design that we should probably get going on sooner rather than later that's going to arrive. Those needs way before the sanitary district can be formed. Again, to get ahead of the ODOT project a little bit. And then Redmond, of course, they're about to start, incurring some expense associated with accommodating additional capacity into their plant, the connection for Terrebonne. How can we pay them back? Can it be up front? This should buy Terrebonne's capacity into their project with ARPA funding or other funding that becomes available, and maybe not have that be a cost associated with the hookup fee, or what? It kind of lot depends on what they're willing to want to, what risk they want to take moving forward in designing capacity that could potentially not realize itself. So other funding sources that are out there for these types of projects, Oregon Business Development Department has a host here, Community Development Block Grant, IFA Special Works, Public Works funds, IFA wastewater financing grants and loans. USDA has a program. The consensus is these programs aren't flush. They're not wandering the earth looking to fund the Terrebonnes. It's the money isn't there to do these types of projects. There used to be. That said, there's a lot. Here we are on the cusp of a recovery investment in the form of an infrastructure package federally, maybe other things at the state level. There are opportunities here that we probably don't know exist yet that we need to go seek. And so That presents yet another, opportunity to really get this thing going, not just have it be a study that just sits on the shelf for another 20 years. So with that, you've asked good questions along the way. I'd like to invite Guy Vernon up. Guy, if you maybe have a seat at this chair here. Of course, Guy was instrumental in getting us involved, and went and talked to his neighbors and got signatures to show that interest to the board. He's been also a very good vocal member of our the TSAG, Terrebonne Sewer Advisory Group, and owns the Rustic Ranch Mobile Home Park. So, Guy, maybe a little bit about your situation and how you feel about the potential for this system in Terrebonne.
Thanks for joining us.
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you very much for providing the funds to get the ball rolling on this. It's the further we get into it, the more I think in the beginning I was a little naive about what it would take to create a system. I know way more about systems now than I did. My particular need is we have 30 homes there, 30 families that live at Rustic Ranch, and I've had 2 different engineering companies, one local one and one out of Portland, look at alternative systems, because I've had several talks with Todd Cleveland and the DEQ about just our system is a kind of a split system, which is partially septic and partially a drill hole, which when I purchased it, I had no idea what a drill hole was, and even that I was purchasing a drill hole. And then once, a couple years later, we had a septic problem, and I got informed that they're no longer legal, and it's really an environmental hazard, and that there's several of these. Chris briefly noted what it is basically is they drill a well at varying deep, and they put a stick of dynamite down there, and they fracture the ground, and then your effluent just flows directly into wherever it goes.
Groundwater.
DQ, if this system fails, they won't let you work on it or anything. It doesn't take a really too much of an imagination to think that, probably a reverse well into the ground isn't a really good idea, and these exist. And we have one there at the park. And anyway, so there's no relief for us. There's nowhere to put another septic system. The drill hole is functioning, sort of. We've really cut back on our water usage, which has helped. But going forward, Todd tells me that a good septic system is, it lasts about 25 years. And, I've owned the park since 1992, and we're kind of on original equipment. So we're nearing, the end. And there's no way to, do any expansion. So anyway, that's my particular story. The little restaurant across the street has closed the Sunspot due to septic failure. The grocery store is having just a tremendous problem, which I think you probably maybe already know about. But anyway, Ryan and Chris have been very informative, worked very hard. We've contacted, there's a small group there that was in one of the slides of, Terrebonne isn't a big place. There's probably less than 20 I will just say, people that own and operate. And at this point, I haven't found anyone that is against it. Right, that they just, they want to know more information. They want to know, obviously, how much it's going to cost. And it kind of boils down to, there's two classes of people that own commercial property there, one with septic problems and ones that are going to have septic problems. And there's a number of people that, through these conversations, the people on the south side of the town there with the alpaca farm, they want to do some different things that just, they're just not going to be able to do these kind of expansions and bring more commerce and business to the area unless this happens. The residential, and I think I have these numbers right, and it's in one of the studies. It would be the westerly portion there. We walked, we talked to close to 100 people. There was, I think, less than 5 that said that they were not interested. Most of those people that were contacted, they understand the need, but it came back to how much is it going to cost, and that's there. And I believe there's 300 plus platted existing lots that are unusable. Isn't that about the number that was in that study? And I may be off on that, but I think that roughly that's the number of lots. Now, several of the properties sit on 2, 3, 5 lots. I know right behind my park, I think there's 7 to 10 lots that are platted that are just, anyway, there's a lot of, it's in the study there. I didn't have the number. So the need is there. And, how we do it is, like I said, it's more complicated, but we do, I've been a member of the community there. I don't live there, but I've owned property there for 30 years, and I know most of the people that do own and operate properties there, and it's a real concern. If your septic goes down, I think Bill Jordan spent over $25,000 each on 2 different properties there, and some there's just no option. There's it's like the Sunspot. I don't think they've come up with a solution on how they can reopen. Anyway, that's what I know, and thank you for providing the money to get this started. We have a core of people that are enthusiastic and interested, and the need is there. So is there any questions you have that I could answer you?
What about the pizza? Is it Basics Pizza? Are they closed? The pizza place right over there?
Base Camp, they've been off and on, and they have had issues. They do have options in the way of the fact that, I think it's the Ferguson family owns the property. They own other lots that they're basically pumping their effluent to. So creating drain fields on, remotely.
I know my contact that works at the deli at Ray's and Sisters said, okay, if you come to my door, Patty, we will say, yes, we got to do this. She goes, do not ask my husband. So, differences in households, but it seems like I'm so glad. Well, this was a 3rd time, and the fact that the city of Redmond is doing that is just, that's pretty amazing if that could be part of the solution for Terrebonne. And to think that the communities could actually work together, I am so greatly appreciative of their willingness. And thank you, Chris, for all your work on this.
You bet.
Couple of questions. What is the depth to groundwater in Terrebonne? My impression is that people's wells to get water, they go pretty deep.
I believe you're correct. I couldn't tell you the exact groundwater depth. That's a question I couldn't answer for you.
Same thing like Redmond, you have a kind of a perched aquifer at about 200 to 300 feet. The full flowing aquifer is about 800 to 1,000.
So the fact that we have got all those drill holes is not as terrifying as it could be in some parts of the county because the groundwater is pretty far down. But
correct. And just to follow up on that a little bit, we did approach the water district, and Commissioner DeBone, I believe you were part of that meeting probably about a year ago as well, just about interest in, hey, would you guys, what do you think about this? And, they felt through studies that they performed that where they're drawing their water from, is not at risk from community contamination like this. So they weren't, as a isolated district, feeling that, this was a had-to-have-it type system to protect the groundwater that they draw from. But
That's good to know.
it's only going one direction.
Yeah, yeah.
I think, if you're interested, is it Mr. Brown at DQ? Is he still there? He's the guy, I've talked to, anyway, DEQ could probably give you a more clear answer about that type of a question than I could.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just don't know.
That's all right. I don't need an exact number. I just need to know, we're not 6 feet to groundwater like in parts of South County.
No, I think it's a little bit different situation. Than that. The fact that, those systems are, they're not allowed anymore. They've identified that there is a potential problem.
Yeah.
Is it an urgent problem now? I don't think anybody can really answer that question.
Yeah.
Todd
There's
Cleveland
Todd.
has just fired up his camera here. Looks
Perfect
like he's
timing.
got something to say.
Well, I don't know. Larry Brown does the permits for DEQ, and there were some questions about some of those systems. Some of the repairs that have been done for the commercial properties from the Base Camp Pizza, including the grocery store, were done as reasonable repairs, but under DEQ permits. And that's why some of those are struggling to operate well, because basically it wouldn't meet minimum standards, but they've put in what they could to make it work, to try to provide a system to support the use at that property. So that kind of helps answer that question, I hope. And so we had at Base Camp Pizza, some of the site conditions weren't exactly great, but compared to other parts of Terrebonne, they were much better. So, the grocery store, the Sunspot, I'm working with Randy Lunsford on some of the issues at some of the facilities associated right back there. That most of these places, like Chris was talking about, you have easements or drain fields that are separate from the property that they serve, and so it's almost like a rat maze of drain fields and septic systems all over the place. So the fact that I've over the last decade have learned where some of these systems are, it's most of them were done 30, 40 years ago. So trying to figure out where they're located and what kind of condition they're in has always been a challenge. And so here we are at pretty aged systems, and it's definitely a significant issue.
Thank you, Todd.
So one of my other questions was about how the vision and financial modeling for this system connects with expectations about growth. So, clearly existing property owners in Terrebonne, have a need for these upgrades. And, but Chris, when you were running us through some of those numbers, you had those EDU numbers that were sort of like, okay, this is what we got now, this is what we got to build out. And it makes me wonder, how dependent on build out we are to make all of this work. I mean, we're already looking at some daunting numbers and only limited options to pay for them. So are we assuming a certain amount of growth and development with these numbers, or are we assuming, okay, existing residents are going to join, and kind of our revenue stream is based on those people, I guess is the question.
Yeah, so the build-out approach was to size pipes primarily, to make sure that we're not, putting a 6-inch pipe in the ground when, the unincorporated community limits would need us to do an 8-inch. as far as the modeling for, the viability and feasibility of the system, we've assumed a smaller portion of growth. So let's serve, phase A is 110 EDU. Let's bring those on. And then I think we assumed 10 EDUs per year, practically, moving forward. So that's, if there's 600 to build out, we're, 200 to 300 additional EDU assumed through the 20 years of growth that we've accommodated. So it's not functional only at build out or viable only at build out. We've made what we think were reasonable assumptions as to the fact that we're going to serve a certain amount, and it's going to spur a little bit of development, certainly.
Right.
I would say Terrebonne, as a community, we've gotten to know them very well over the past several years. I think the opinions are all over the place, but certainly I think there are folks in the community that like it just how it is.
Right.
And however, would certainly appreciate the ability to have a sewer system that they can, rely on.
That was my concern is, I think we've heard through the Highway 97 process that there are a lot of people who are resistant to growth. And if we were banking on growth to make this all pencil out, then I would have concerns. So, but it sounds like the growth assumptions in your financial modeling are pretty modest. I mean, 10 additional 10 EDU per year in this commercial core that has a build out of 359. I mean, that doesn't sound, it sounds pretty conservative.
We think so. We think it's probably what most likely will happen, and the big caveat here is the fact that there's a lot of the way the model's set up requires a lot of grant funding for capital, which is beyond what typically you see, but probably the only way it pencils. If we start talking about a rate of $75, $85 per month, in the community, that would be a burden.
It's interesting.
And I believe there's a lot of pent-up demand there. I know, I've looked at expanding our park. We have, probably, it's about 10 acres, and less than half of it is actually developed at this point. There's, I don't know the exact number of visitors to Smith Rock, but it's substantial every year. And, Terrebonne serves for a service center for all of Crooked River Ranch, which is pretty big, it's where they come to, groceries and so forth. So I think the demand exists there. It just, the expansion and just, it's not, they did a good job of redoing the water system, and we have fire hydrants and fire flow and stuff now. So it's, but it's just bottlenecked with sewer, and as Todd was saying, it's most of the like my park is, it predates my purchase in 1992, so it's it's pretty old, and so I think 10 per year is on the low side myself.
Well, if you look at Phase B, for that residential on the west side, there's actually a build-out of 162 spots. So that's like 50% of what you have existing today. It does seem rather, if you're only taking in, 10 a year, which is extremely conservative, I think that's good. But there is a lot of potential there.
Yeah, and it's all these assumptions, everything's built on servicing Phase A as being a serviceable phase that pencils. So, and that's where the need is and the momentum is in the community right now. So if we needed a bigger area, to get it to pencil, that brought in residential where people maybe aren't super willing to take on a utility bill if their system's still functional and not obsolete, that may make it more politically complicated to establish.
Well, and one of the questions that was posed to me, they said, well, it's going to be very expensive for you to hook up your park. And I said, well, if we don't end up a solution, I won't have a park. So it's, when you're faced with things like that, you just, if I have to refinance or whatever it is, it's just, there isn't really an option B. And I think that's where a lot of these businesses are facing is that, they'll have to raise prices or whatever, or they're just going to have to figure out how to do this and continue on, because if it doesn't get done, then you're not going to have a business and the value of your property will just, crater.
So my one of the other kind of ways I'm trying to think about this, or I'd like us to think about this, is sort of in terms of kind of precedent and and history. So we literally just heard this morning about the loan that was made to the La Pine district, before the city incorporated there, and to go back to the kind of growth assumptions, basically what made that all work and, got that loan paid off earlier than it expected was growth. But, this is, Terrebonne is a different situation, and we have heard from, maybe not all, but a lot of people from the Terrebonne area that they're not very excited about growth. In the course of going through the discussions about what we're doing at Highway 97 and at the Lower Bridge interchange, where I think about this project, and then I think about, well, what's next? And in my mind, we're going to need a project like this in Tumalo in probably just a couple of years. And they're for very different reasons, because they got really shallow groundwater, and there's going to be all, we have septic issues associated with that as well. So what we sign up for here, kind of creates an expectation about how we're going to deal with situations like this in the future. And, it does make me concerned that we're sort of kind of, putting a lot of eggs in the ARPA basket, from that respect, because we don't know if we're going to have that in 5 or 10 years. So, I do want us to get to a plan that is, sustainable, and replicable in the future. And I'm not, I have concerns about a major ARPA allocation, in the range of $4 million or more dollars, from that perspective. At the same time, I definitely hear how urgent this situation is, and that's a really important consideration as well.
I think this is a great opportunity to partner with this. ARPA dollars are mentioned. Figuring out the number can be a step that we all do here. One question I have is this: the footprint of the unincorporated community. Is it truly this square? Because I know the zoning of south of this Phase B yellow line is kind of the same zone, but is this the footprint? Is it this square?
No, it has a different shape to it. It goes further to the north across Lower Bridge and then grabs, some of the alpaca area. Just graphically, it was shown as that. The zoning doesn't permit dense development in the areas that aren't a part of that.
And I'm just trying, so are there other areas that are available in the urban unincorporated, sorry, not urban, but Terrebonne unincorporated community? Is there anything else that's sewerable that could be sewered? Because, you don't put sewers in rural, except an unincorporated community from the statewide land use. So is there anything else that's sewerable?
Outside the area?
Nick's ready to maybe help.
Here.
Right here.
Yeah, just looking at the map, just making sure.
Yeah.
Nick Leland, Community Development Director.
sewer is available, you're right, only in the defined unincorporated community. So the area south that Chris is mentioning, I think that's a 5-acre minimum. So legally, it's available. But in terms of zoning, there wouldn't be the density like we're seeing in the areas Chris has identified.
Well, so 5-acre minimum, and there's a few parcels in there that are larger than 10 acres, so there are just a couple opportunities to subdivide if there was, I mean, they could do it today with or without sewer, probably.
Right.
But I'm just pointing out that there are other places that could be sewerable.
Yeah, in the 5-acre zone, there's, there's no need for sewer, just given the amount of space they have for drain field and reserve. And, but it's a small number in that area that, it would be available.
Well, it'd be going right through
With the step system especially.
backyards of some. So, okay.
Yep.
It's just not a business case that makes sense to even talk about, is what it boils down to, it looks like. Okay.
So Chris, I have a question. Looking at the schedule, you say Phase A, it's 4.3 million. Is that the capital that we need to be thinking about? Is that what you've taken from our other handout? This handout with all the detail, where it gets down to like 4.3 million of minimum grant to fund the balance? Is that what that 4.3 is?
Yeah, 4.3 represents the amount necessary to basically get all the pipe in the ground. Does not include what the EDU, the hookup fee, basically, which would be $10,000, a portion of which pays for the capacity in the Redmond's treatment plant, a larger portion of which pays for the pump station retrofit and hookup to and power, basically, for each unit. So 4.3 is just the pipe, basically.
Okay.
Well, so this will be kind of a dance with the community, knowing that, okay, if we're going to do this, let's go do this. If you can bring this to the table, you can bring this to the table. I support some investment in ARPA to really get this thing going. This is a community sewer system for existing privately owned properties. So that's the big difference for La Pine, because that was undeveloped, publicly owned properties that had a huge opportunity to take it from BLM land to inside of an urban growth boundary, which is even before that, to, neighborhoods with SDCs. So this is first sailed SDCs. This is privately owned property already. That's the big difference. So, was there expectation of put any more direction to this today? Because
Nope. We, the purpose of this was to give you that update, clarify maybe some questions regarding the status of it in general, and kind of align the timing with some of the funding requests that you're hearing from the community for this and other projects. So we're close to wrapping it up. The next step, in addition to what was outlined, we'll have something for the community to review, and hopefully, that this gets the ball rolling.
Yep. Well, I'm hoping community members can go back and click on this and watch at their leisure from home, because this is all recorded and available. So this will be a point where people can digest the facts as we know them right now.
Yep, and it's a matter of developing those champions to say, I know it's a big ask, but let's do a sanitary district. I'm willing to serve and be a part of that.
Yep. Who's ready to be on a board?
Yep.
So I want to ask whether we're at a point with this whether the analysis needs to be complete, or whether we're at a point right now where we could be talking to OBDD and USDA Rural Development and other entities, because I would like to get a feel for what we could leverage before we try to do it all out of the ARPA dollars. I'm supportive of some investment as well, but the more leverage that we can get for the ARPA dollars that we put in, the better in my mind. And it would be great to know, if USD Rural Development says, oh, let me tell you that, the infrastructure bill that's it's like 98% of the way through Congress is going to, we have boatload of money for water, wastewater, the water wastewater program, just waiting for you. It would be great to know that.
Yeah,
before.
so those things can, the things that need to happen in parallel are the sanitary district formation, getting the leadership and the property owners going, motivated to get that district process going. Those other conversations can happen in parallel. The county, on behalf of the future district, talking to Redmond, certainly working with ODOT, and then initiating those types of conversations. Now we've kind of reached our budget limit for what we've allocated for the study, and to really facilitate forward momentum, it's probably funds to assist with the district formation, funds to continue engineering this and working those applications through those funding agencies. So if there was an ask to have today, it would be, certainly geared around, some funding to make sure that we don't stall on those areas.
I definitely don't want you to stall, and I know in November of 19, I did speak to John Hoffman when he was the head of the USDA area, and they seem to think that there would be dollars at that point in time, and this is just taking a bit longer than we would have imagined, but I'm happy that it's at this point now, and hearing what we did here about Redmond is incredibly significant for this project.
I'd support an allocation of planning, organizing, district forming dollars right now. Do you have a sense of kind of what would be a useful dollar number to for those purposes?
We'd have to draw a scope around that. I mean, if $100,000 would probably continue the momentum to the next point in the way of legal assistance, in the way of scoping additional work for our consultant to forward this with the funding agencies.
And for shaking down those funding agencies, definitely. Does Greg need to be here for us to make an ARPA motion, or?
Well, I'm thinking there's a half a step here, just making sure people respond to this meeting and any connection to the community. Mr. Vernon's here, but just that next connection, or at least time to digest what we talked about today and see if anybody's going to call us. Because I'm about there too, and in fact I would probably say let's do something more substantial out of ARPA dollars to show Redmond that Deschutes County is going to lean into this to aim for success. So I'm just saying, there's different ways we can go on this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I had some hope that we could hold on the ARPA investment, on the ARPA commitment, and the capital commitment until we had some idea of what other dollars might be available from the state or the feds. But
well, these are federal dollars.
Yeah, other federal dollars. Particularly USDA rural development. I think of. I track USDA rural development's work around the state, and they have done. They've worked some miracles for water and wastewater systems for small communities.
Oh yeah, let's get to that. So my point there was, maybe wait until next week, see if we get engaged with a couple of community members.
Yes,
again.
if we can hear from 110 of those existing businesses in Phase A, we'd love to hear from you. Add
Or
that
10
to-
of them, so getting engaged as a board to the effort, and thank you very much for doing what you're doing, and we do have a list of people that are, already engaged, obviously, but yeah, so basically, I would like to see a moment where we're working with not just the names on paper, but with the people in a commitment to go forward together. I guess that's my vision.
I support that. I mean, I do also believe that getting people organized, getting them on board, it takes person hours. So I want to make sure that we're not, we're not leaving the champions for this project kind of hanging without support, and B, that we're not basically asking our roads director to be the kind of the community organizer for.
And I think we're kind of going down that same path. I'd like to see the engagement by a couple of these folks. Personally, let's have a conversation, because then we know we're working together. So we're close.
We'll definitely take that back to the group, and
Okay.
I assume some of them are watching right now
Yep.
on the regular feed as well. They're informed of that.
Great.
Great.
Thank
Thank you,
you. Great update. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Vernon.
Thank you.
So we got a couple other items. Just gonna take. Yeah, not a problem. So we'll just take a 5-minute break and then we'll be back for other items. Okay, welcome back. So this is our board meeting. Other items following the agenda. So Tom, you mentioned two, and I've got them both here. One of them is a letter, I'll get going, I guess, to the cities asking for partnership with the Stabilization Center. So letters could be sent out. So I think the Pacific Source was also Ben Redmond, and I don't know, there was four letters, I think.
The Health Council.
Okay, Central Oregon Health Council. So these are proposed letters. I would have one, just looking through one copy, the one to City of Bend. On the end of the front page, we talk about, we are still in need of additional funds in order to continue to operate our current level. Without additional funding, we'll be unable to provide 24/7 access. So maybe without partnership or something is instead of additional funding. Because obviously the funding's the question, but we're asking for partnership here because this is a long-term, multi-year, be our partner ask.
And I mean, the other tweak to that letter, I guess all of them, like in the first sentence says, we're asking for we're asking you for funding, putting it out there direct. But I mean,
yeah, it does say that we are
maybe-
ready to ask for financial support. That's what
yeah,
it says.
I mean, we could say, because we don't, like as we get into farther into the letter, it's not, we don't need the financial support right now, but future, so to kind of get that concept of future into that first sentence, financial support for future operation.
Yep. It says consider an annual contribution to help. Yeah, but yeah, that is definitely the concept. Oh, so Whitney, sorry, we're discussing one of the letters that you.
Nope, that's okay.
So I was just referring to the City of Bend version. I don't know if they're all four the same.
There's some variation, but they're pretty close.
Okay, yeah, so the concept so far was on the bottom of the front page, instead of without additional funding, maybe to just say something about, please partner with us at that point, because it does start off with, we're requesting financial support. That was the first line in the whole letter. And then Commissioner Chang's mentioning about, basically.
In that first sentence where it says we're asking for financial support, to kind of give them the sense that we're asking for financial support in the future.
Okay.
As opposed to, like, we don't need their money right now, we need it in 2023, or sorry, is it 2023 or 2022? We need it 2022.
FY 23.
I think it's 23 and 24.
FY 23, yeah.
Okay, I can definitely make those minor tweaks, and I'll circulate another draft for the board's final review, and then we'll get them prepared for signature. That sounds good.
And then if we could approve the letter for the City of Bend possibly right away and get it to them, because we'll be meeting with them next Thursday, a week from tomorrow.
Yeah. And then the other one, but if the wording is basically the same as the other ones,
but I
then we
mean,
might
that's
as well.
why we would do it.
But yeah, the urgency was to approve the City of Bend letter so that we can have that as a discussion point next week.
Is that, are you up to speed on that one, Commissioner Dare, with reading them?
No, I did want to make a comment that I have gotten many calls about where they were placing the homeless camp between the schools, and people are really upset, and I think they're calling everyone they possibly can. So I said I would say something about that. That location might need some further analysis. If we're talking about the City of Bend.
Well, so we'll all see the letters for the Stabilization Center to ask, and then sign them.
Right.
To get out the door. Okay. So then, yeah, the next item, if that one's done, the next item is a memo. We got kind of a simple outline for the joint meeting. So this would fit into your concept right there. Tom and I were on a video call with the mayor and city manager yesterday, and this is what came out of that. Did you see that?
I did.
It's in our box.
I didn't. Yeah, I left it on my desk because I didn't realize we were going to talk about it today.
It's just an offer to.
Yeah, they were hoping to get it back by tomorrow, so that's why I brought it. So you can.
I just gave him mine there. So she might.
Okay.
Okay, so now we all have one. So the idea is it is going to be a virtual meeting. This is next Thursday night. Just like,
Isn't it in the afternoon?
oh, yeah, maybe in the
Oh,
afternoon.
wait.
I don't know what time.
It's at 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
Thursday afternoon, okay. I was planning on 6 at night, but I'll make sure to be there at 1. When we met jointly with Redmond last time, it just kind of felt right for me to let him generally run the meeting after we all did our introductions, and then I was able to, be the chair, and we could have our conversation. So just let you know, the mayor and I kind of spoke about that. After we do our formalities, she can run the agenda.
Okay.
But, I mean, we'll be able to step in whenever we need to.
So they stuck the stabilization center under the housing and homelessness updates, which I don't think is actually exactly the right place for it, but I mean, I want to make sure it gets discussed on Thursday, so I'm glad it's on the agenda.
So we made the pitch for it to be in there somewhere, and
Yeah.
we got some initial pushback, so the fact that it is on there is somewhat of a victory, but, so that initial section isn't designed to be a, sort of a mutual update back and forth on what we're doing on each one, and they know why it's on there, why we wanted it on there, so I don't think it's going to be a surprise. And they will have received the letter, obviously, by then, so they'll have that background, so.
You're saying stabilization center is a mental health, behavioral health facility, so we don't incarcerate people, different than a homeless issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we heard the numbers from Holly this winter, maybe, was it 15 or 20% of the people who come through there are homeless? So yeah, it serves some homeless people, but the vast majority of the people coming through the stabilization center aren't homeless.
Cross-section of anybody and everybody, and you said that. So I would support proposing that it moves under other topics. I agree with that. And we can make that statement. That's why it's under other topics.
Unless they want to, unless then they want to cut it from the agenda, in which case, just keep it where it is.
Well,
And thank you.
It's
And
our agenda, it's our project, it's a joint agenda, but no, we can put it there.
and thank you for negotiating that, Tom.
So at the bottom, it talks RV park. Remember, I'm real excited about the possibilities of a low barrier RV park, which is going to be an effort, but also just RV parks in general, which will provide transitional opportunities for people, either living here out in the woods or, recreating and being here temporarily. So just expanding that whole market, I think is going to be valuable for everybody. So I'll talk a little bit about that.
Do we have a time frame for this meeting, as in, like I know when the beginning time is, but are there any expectations about when this meeting is going to end?
Scheduled for an hour and a
3:30?
half.
Hour and a half.
Or 2.5.
Yeah, 3:30 is the ending time.
Well, yeah, so we do need to get to other topics then, because it'll be tricky if we don't just get through this thing.
So maybe it's better to keep it at the top of the agenda.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I mean, that's the reality. As soon as you look at this, it's going to be tricky to get through this in an hour and a half.
No, it's actually 2.5, 3:30.
Oh, 2.5 hours, good.
Yeah, it's 2.5 hours, so we should be able to manage, hopefully.
A lot of it, at least.
It's funny, I've been preparing for it, and I didn't know what time it was or how long it was going to be. Okay, so there's a proposed general, so then there'll be there'll be a published agenda, I think. Yeah, so it says proposed agenda to be posted, so it'll have kind of the topics, but this is more expanded, what we're seeing here right now, in case it changes around also. So, any thoughts on this? Are we kind of happy with that one proposed change?
It's fine.
Okay.
I mean, there's so many other things that we could talk with the city about, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's, you know, it's going to be a pretty full 2.5 hours as is. So, yeah, we can save other items for, we can save other topics for the next joint meeting.
We could put a kind of an announcement of traffic safety, join us on September 20th, just as a bullet point where we don't even really need to say anything, which is one of our discussions.
September 30th for the safety?
Was it the 30th?
Yes,
And I
September
said the
30th.
20th.
Yes, I'm sorry. Just-
Oh, good catch. See.
It's okay.
So, yeah, could we add that
September
as a
30th.
bullet point in the bottom, but, it almost, just having it on there is all we need to do, probably. September 30th Safety Summit, Traffic Safety Summit. Okay. Any other item? Commissioner Adair, anything else?
No, I think I've said enough today.
Commissioner Chang?
I'm good on this.
Just like you clarified right after lunch, maybe we want to do that again, because now I have 500 emails. I mean, that was a trigger that you did this early this morning, and
Well, it wasn't a trigger. The way that people misinterpreted my statement was a trigger. But
What-
yes, I
it's a
could-
trigger, whatever.
I
I'm
could
not
clar-
debating how it could be a
Yeah.
human trigger. There's 500 emails in my inbox.
Okay.
So you were asking for incentives,
So
at
this,
the county level and possibly in the community.
yeah.
Commissioner Adair made some great statements about,
I said personal choice.
yeah, the status of the
I think
industry.
everyone out there in the world knows, and I think all the things that we should be doing, and, like I keep repeating, please get a KN95 mask. If you're going to wear a mask, you need to wear a mask that actually works, and clearly the numbers are indicative that that's a safer choice. So anyway, yeah, I said a
Well,
lot of
and I want to
things.
see the
But the-
culture of
but
safety
the- but-
and out here, making sure people are wearing masks. Please get a vaccine, but I'm not going down the path of mandating, which you didn't either. And you were talking about incentives. So, yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
it was a trigger again in the
Just to-
community.
Just so everyone is super clear, I suggested incentives for employers that were interested to offer voluntary, benefits or opportunities for their employees. I did not suggest a mandate, and I also, just to be clear, I want to emphasize that I don't think offering an incentive that someone can use or refuse is impinging upon freedom, anyone's freedom, or taking choices away from anyone. It's actually giving people more choices. So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure, very clear, that people understand that no one was talking about a mandate this morning.
Okay, thank you. Just, yeah, as I say, just the activity I've seen on my phone right now. Okay, is there anything else, other items? Seeing nothing, we'll go to an executive session on a couple land use items. So